Hello, this is Chala, Dincoy, CEO and founder of The Repositioning Expert. Welcome to an episode of Naked Marketing. No, we are not in towels, but this is a decent show. It's PG-13. We talk about our biggest marketing mistakes. Today, I have my special guest, Andrew Deutsch. Welcome, Andrew.
Hey, thanks so much for having me on. It's great to see you.
So tell all these folks what it is that you do and who you help.
All right, our group, the Fangled Group, we are in the business of being a strategy first marketing and sales consultancy on a global scale.
Mhm.
We help companies really go to their core of who their customer is and understand that customer in a way that we know the challenges, the pains, the things that they need, and then look at our client from how they differentiate in a way that matters to that customer to solve their problem, and in a way that bests all the other alternatives out there to attempt to solve those same problems.
So who is your ideal target? I mean, that's the,
Yeah.
hated question.
Yeah, if you'd asked me this a couple of years ago, I would have told you we're strictly a B2B in the industrial space, helping industrial companies. And we have a network in about 120 countries. So a lot of our work was helping companies in this country find markets all over the world.
Mm.
In the last couple of years, we've sort of softened that position because our strategy works so well, even in the consumer and direct to consumer markets. So we're now probably 70-30 industrial, 70 and 30 other markets.
So how did you fall into this?
I studied international trade as in my bachelor's, and then went through a period where I knew that without a master's there weren't positions, but every MBA I knew was unemployed. So I went back to school and wanted to have a different resume. So went back and studied in the area of psychology and really focused that multicultural marketing aspect of psychology into what I knew about international trade, and began to do projects in Central and South America. I lived in Brazil for about 10 years where I grew the business.
My God.
And then when came back to the States with my family and continued to grow it in a variety of different, not enough time on the podcast to go through the whole story, but
My
uh,
God.
it's,
That's so interesting.
yeah.
So what was it like working in Brazil?
The first years that I was there, it was pretty darn exciting and new and interesting. And then through the political structure of what was happening post 9/11 and otherwise, it started to become a little bit dangerous to be there as an American expat living abroad.
Yeah.
So we decided to come back to the States. But it's a great country with great people, much like some neighborhoods in this country. There's a lot of really great people who kind of get held hostage by a few real jerks that want to create havoc. So
Yeah. So I mean, talk to me about, I mean, the whole podcast here is about mistakes, and I'm sure you've
sure.
seen your share of them
Oh
and
yeah.
you've made your share of them, which is so great that you're here to talk about what is, first of all, the biggest mistake you've made. And then I want to ask about the biggest mistakes you see businesses making.
Yeah, back in the early days when we were working on marketing strategy, we didn't really know, or I should say not we, um, was always dealing with people that had sort of their own design aesthetic and and it was always interesting because depending on who they were, we would build branding and logo and all this kind of stuff with the creative team based on that rather than the strategy.
Mm.
So a company would go and who they were as their brand really didn't speak to their customer because I hadn't learned that yet. So we made a lot of mistakes. I was joking with you before. I had a client who was in the used car business, and he was trying to create this sort of network wholesale business. But his passion in life was role playing games like Dungeons and Dragons. So he insisted that all of his branding had to look like ogres and trolls and all these crazy things that are involved. And I'm
Oh,
sure I'm sure he was having a blast with that in his private life. But we had to really at that point in time break it down and go, dude, look look at your customer base. How many of your customers have sat in your dungeon when you're playing your game and played? Well, none. So why would you build a strategy based on something that doesn't appeal to them? And we talked about, back in the days of record stores. Imagine anyone opening up a record store, music store, only selling music they like. It's
yeah.
the same huge mistake. You can't position your company to be where you're the customer. You're not the customer. And the biggest mistake was not recognizing that you as the business owner are not your customer necessarily.
That is great. And so is that the most common thing that you see, mistake being made by your clients today?
When it comes to the core, trying to build a strategic marketing plan, absolutely. I mean,
Mm,
we see other mistakes in terms of how they try to grow that strategy that they do here in the US to go globally,
mm,
which usually is the biggest life lesson for a company that wants to go around the world and sell their products, is they think that they can do it there like they do it here.
right.
And we see a lot of just really, really bad ideas that were thought to be strategies that we have to help and really become powerful.
Do you have any stories to tell us about some, nightmares that have happened and or some nightmares that you've saved?
Yeah, I can give you one example was in the furniture industry. So we had a client here in the US that manufactured really, really high-end sofas, the kind of sofa that you would buy a love seat for $5,000 for your house.
Mm-hmm.
And they wanted to sell it down in South America. And there is a small market for it, and they weren't looking to sell hundreds and thousands of them. They were looking to sell, but in the US, the consumer who buys that level of sofa wants to know what's inside the sofa. They want to see the layers of material. They want to know what kind of a spring, how many directions the springs were hand tied, all of that. And they were trying for years to sell overseas and had no success. Well, when we dug in and did an actual study with retailers in Argentina, Brazil, Chile, and Peru, they all basically came back with the same response. My customer doesn't care. They don't
Mm-hmm.
want to know what's inside. They buy it with their butt, was basically the translation in all of those places. If they can tell their friends, I imported this from America where it was handmade, that's enough. It's got to be stylish. It's got to have a great looking fabric, and I have to have bragging rights. That's what. And by the way, before all of that, when I sit on it, my butt has to be happy.
Okay.
That was what the consumers down there and what the stores were telling us in their experience. So if you sent down all the demo materials and translated it, you'd go nowhere in the market.
Mm.
So instead, we built a prestige of the American handcraft sofa that's more comfortable than anything that you've ever owned and will make your friends jealous. And in that form of changing the position of how it was marketed there, it would insult American consumers.
Mm.
But there, boy, sales were fantastic. They really, it was a great way to do it.
Love it. I mean, there's so many classic examples of marketing gone wrong internationally because my minor was also in international marketing. And
Hmm.
I mean, how the Chinese translation of Coca-Cola was offensive, or the in Quebec where I'm from, the Big Mac was called the Gros Joe, which meant large breasts. These were such classic examples of, international marketing gone wrong. And it's so funny to
Yeah.
hear that it's like still happening, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, the other huge mistake that companies make going globally is, and typically the engagement starts with, oh yeah, we're already selling overseas. Well, where are you selling? Well, we're selling to England and Australia, South Africa. And you go, interesting, they all speak English. Why do you think that is?
Mhm.
And then they'll have like some weird, I shouldn't say weird, some unknown, like say in Uzbekistan or something like that that's buying. And you go, how did you get into that market? Oh, they met us at a trade show. And in
Ah,
that case, do you know that you have the best trading partner in that country, or did you accept them out of convenience?
right.
And then the next level is, they'll have some European guy who came and had English skills and bought, but again, doesn't have the reach to the rest of Europe, but the company gave him exclusivity for the continent. So you see all sorts of mistakes like that. And of course, my favorite story, there's a country who will remain nameless, where if you go to a trade show, every person you meet from that country will tell you, I am the number one in this category in my country. Nobody does more than me. I'm number one. So it's the country that no longer believes in math because it's the only place in the world where you can meet 10 number ones in a day. so
Shall
so
remain nameless.
yeah. and
That's
and and the last of those mistakes in that same mindset is believing that you as an American, as a Canadian, know how to do business in that country better than they do.
mm,
It works here, how could it not work there? This is what we do. Why don't you have to follow these procedures? You have to follow this. And many times, whether it's legal, cultural, or otherwise, it doesn't work. And you have to find that partner that you can trust to adapt what it is that you do, whether it's a product, service, or otherwise, in a way that makes sense and matters to that market.
So do you find local partners to help you do
Yes.
that? Is that how you help them?
Always, always. We have a network from my work over the years in about 120 different countries. And
Hmm.
as far as I can see, I've not come across another organization on the budget that we charge that can get someone to that global stage faster and more effectively than Fangled. And it's because our folks know how we work and can do those individual studies in each of those countries and get back with us. First of all, is it a product that even belongs in that country? And if it is there a competitive advantage to the alternatives in that country? And again, alternatives don't mean competitors. So for example, if you create an adhesive tape that can do some amazing function in the industrial space, your competitors aren't just tape. It could be liquid adhesive, it could be mechanical fasteners. Those are the alternatives. So do we have a solution that bests what they have going now? And then the next is the economic question. Can we be competitive? Does our advantage give us an advantage also cost wise? We can solve your problem better than anybody else, but it'll cost you more than you could ever recover in your sales. Then it's probably not viable either.
So, I mean, I can understand how you do the consumer research, but how do you do the B2B? Are
That's
you
actually easier than the consumer research.
okay?
Yeah.
That's great. So you
Yeah.
still engage the local research teams and then
Yeah. There's so many tools that and back in the old days, it was registers. You'd sit and fold through pages. Now with organizations that we work with on the internet in each of those regions, I would say we've cut our time to market by a third.
that's great.
Yeah.
Are there, I mean, you said you haven't met a lot of people who are doing what you do. Is there a lot of competitive players in your space?
There are a lot of really, really big, expensive organizations that do what we do
Uh-huh.
that don't have the intimate relationships in those places like we do.
Right.
I mean, they're like, again, there's no product out there that doesn't have a competitor. I
Right.
mean, if you don't want to have a cell phone, you can get other ways to communicate.
Mhm.
So of course we have people who compete in that same space. We
Right.
just think that we do it in a way that is quicker and more economical than anybody else out there.
That's great. So, do you have any parting advice for people who are listening and who want to market better?
Yeah, I mean, going back to the core question of be it making a mistake. Uh, some of the greatest learning I've ever had has been from going back and looking at a mistake and learning from it. So
Mhm.
don't get discouraged if you run a campaign and it doesn't hit on all cylinders, because there's a lot to learn from it. And the next time you come out of the box, if you learn from it, it was worth doing. If you
Yeah.
do it again, then shame on you.
Shame on me once, shame on you twice. What was it? Shame on you, shame on me.
Shame on you. I don't care how many
It's shame.
times. Just be shamed.
Sounds like a the least
Sorry
people
about that.
are. That's okay. So how could people reach you, Andrew?
You can find me on LinkedIn. It's pretty by my name. You can
Mhm.
go to my website, fangledtech.com, like you can see right there.
Uh-huh.
And also you can check out my podcast, The Fangled Cast on YouTube, as
Right.
well as on all of those places like Stitcher and Apple and everywhere else that the audio goes.
Uh-huh. So
And
who do you
yeah,
interview?
pardon?
Who are your guests? Who is the interviewees?
Yeah, we pick a topic of something that I think is vital to and something that strikes my curiosity, and then I go out and I find an expert and have a conversation.
Very nice.
So for example, curiosity is something that I'm always curious about. So I found an expert who studies curiosity and the effect that it has on the workforce, how to measure levels of curiosity, how to raise those levels, and what the outcomes are. And we had a conversation about that. That's an example of an episode.
Very interesting. It's not at all related to marketing like I thought it would be, but my
Uh,
God, is it interesting.
a lot of it is. Last week, I interviewed a gentleman who's from the Navajo reservation, or the Diné, as they call. And we
Uh-huh.
had a conversation about how does someone in an environment with very, very few entrepreneurs as role models, how do you get the spark to be an entrepreneur, and how did you do it? And he has a clothing line that's been very successful.
Oh, very nice.
So
Wow,
those are the kinds of topics that we talk about.
that's great. We're gonna check it out. Thanks so much for being here.
I had a blast. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.